In the summer of 2018, an orca named Tahlequah gave birth off the coast of Washington. Her calf lived for 30 minutes, then it died. What she did next stopped marine biologists cold. She refused to let the body sink. She balanced it on her head and pushed it through the water. For 17 days across 1,000 miles. She was not confused. She was not malfunctioning. When the dead calf slipped off, she dove and retrieved it, again and again, for more than 2 weeks. The question scientists couldn't shake was simpler and far more uncomfortable than anything about whales. Did she know exactly what had happened? And if she did, what does that mean about every other animal we have spent centuries assuming feels nothing? For most of scientific history, the official answer was clean. Understanding death was a human thing. A dog, a crow, an elephant. They were thought to live in a permanent present. When something stopped moving, the animal simply lost interest and moved on. No grief, no comprehension, just instinct switching off. That position held for a long time, partly because the alternative was too unsettling to take seriously. But over the last 20 years, that wall has been quietly collapsing. There is now an entire field built around studying it. It's called comparative thanatology, the science of how animals respond to death. And it exists because researchers kept witnessing things they were not supposed to see. Let's start with the ones closest to us and work toward the answer nobody is comfortable giving. Tahlequah was not a one-time event. Scientists have now documented this behavior in dolphins, whales, and porpoises around the world. Mothers carrying, nudging, lifting dead calves toward the surface as if trying to make them breathe. They will do it until the body falls apart. They will stop eating. They will fall behind the pod. Here is the detail that unsettles researchers most. These animals know what a dead body is. They eat fish. They have seen death their entire lives. So this is not an animal that doesn't understand the body has stopped working. This is an animal that understands and refuses to accept it anyway. That is not a malfunction. In a human, we would have a word for that. We would call it grief. But not every animal that responds to death is mourning. And the next example is where it gets stranger. At the University of Washington, researcher Kaylee Swift ran an experiment with crows. When a crow discovers a dead crow, it doesn't ignore it, it calls out. Others arrive. They gather around the body, and they go quiet. A behavior people have called a crow funeral. Except it isn't a funeral. Swift found that the crows weren't grieving the dead bird. They were studying it. They were learning. A dead crow meant something in this place killed a crow. So the survivors memorized the location, the threat, even the face of whoever was nearby. They weren't saying goodbye. They were taking notes for their own survival. So now we have two completely different things that look almost identical from the outside. A whale that can't let go. A crow that's running a threat assessment. Both triggered by a body. Both impossible to explain if animals understand nothing. And we're only getting deeper. Elephants take it further than almost anything else on Earth. Researcher Karen McComb tested what happens when elephants are shown different objects. A piece of wood, the skull of a buffalo, and the skull of another elephant. The elephants barely glanced at the wood or the buffalo, but the elephant's skull, they stayed. They reached out with their trunks. They touched it, turned it, ran the tips of their trunks along it slowly, the way they greet the living. In the wild, elephants have been seen returning to the bones of their dead, sometimes years later. They will stand over them in silence. They will carry the bones a short distance and set them down. They appear to recognize somehow that these particular bones used to be someone. Think about what that requires. Not just noticing a body, remembering an individual, and connecting a pile of dry bones long after the body is gone, back to a creature they once knew. That is memory and meaning, stacked on top of each other. And then there are chimpanzees, who do the thing that's almost too human to describe calmly. A chimpanzee mother whose infant dies will not always put it down. She will carry the body for days, sometimes weeks. She'll groom it, carry it on her back, keep it close long after it has begun to decay. Researchers in the wild have watched this play out more times than they can count, and they still struggle to write about it without flinching. The most famous case came from Jane Goodall. She studied a young chimp named Flint, whose mother Flo was the matriarch of the group. When Flo died, Flint, already old enough to live on his own, stopped eating. He withdrew from the others. He returned to the spot where his mother's body had been and stayed near it. Within about 3.5 weeks of his mother's death, Flint was dead too. Goodall believed he died of grief. We cannot prove that, but we cannot easily explain it any other way. So by now you might be thinking the answer is obvious. Animals understand death. Case closed. Here is where it gets stranger, because that's not the answer either. Consider the ant. When an ant dies in the colony, other ants carry the body away to a refuse pile. It looks organized. It looks almost ceremonial. For years, it seemed like proof that even insects grasp death. Then the biologist E.O. Wilson found out what was actually happening. A dead ant releases a specific chemical, oleic acid, as it decomposes. That chemical is the only signal the other ants are responding to. To prove it, Wilson dabbed a tiny amount of oleic acid onto a living, healthy ant. The other ants immediately picked it up and hauled it to the corpse pile. The ant was alive. It struggled. It walked back. They carried it out again. As far as the colony was concerned, anything that smells like death is dead, no matter what it does. The ant doesn't understand death at all. It's reading a chemistry signal, nothing more. And that's the key that unlocks the whole question. Responding to death is not the same as understanding it. The reaction can be pure instinct like the ant, or it can be something far deeper, like the whale. From the outside, you often can't tell which one you're looking at, which leaves the hardest question of all. Not whether animals react to a dead body, some clearly do, but do any of them understand what we understand? That death is permanent, that it can't be undone, that it comes for everything, and that one day it will come for them? That last piece, knowing that you yourself will die, may be the rarest thing in nature. There's reasonable evidence that elephants, great apes, and some whales grasp parts of it, that death is real, that it's final, that an individual is gone and not coming back. Whether any animal lies awake with the knowledge of its own ending the way you can, that science genuinely does not know yet. And this is where it stops being about whales and bones and becomes about your own living room. If you've ever had a dog who waited at the door for someone who was never coming home, who searched the house, who stopped eating, who pressed against the empty bed, you've probably told yourself you were imagining the grief, that you were projecting, that an animal can't really understand loss. After everything researchers have now documented, that assumption is the one that no longer holds. The dog may not understand death the way you do, but it understands nothing is no longer a position the science supports. For a long time, we believed that knowing about death was the lonely privilege that set us apart, the one heavy thing only humans had to carry. It turns out we may not be carrying it alone. The whale who wouldn't let her calf sink wasn't broken. The elephant standing over old bones wasn't confused. The chimp who stopped eating after his mother died wasn't malfunctioning. They were doing the same thing we do when we stand at a graveside and refuse, for just a moment, to believe it's real. We thought understanding death was what made us human. It might just be what makes us alive.